All set. Good. Good evening, everybody. I'll call the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. My name is Richard Stewart. I'm the mayor, and I want to acknowledge that City Council has had a very busy day today. It was an all-day meeting related to budget, and so Council have worked very hard, and I want to acknowledge that hard work for them. And I also want to do one thing officially. Councillor Sikora, you're out of order. There, I'm done. Just to put it on the record, I'm sure it will apply later on anyway. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our first item is a presentation. We're here in order to provide recognition of Josh Eisner, and this is for the Ministry of Justice, Crime Prevention and Community Safety Award for Children and Youth. I'd like to invite Mr. Eisner to come forward.
Mr. Eisner, get up here. Hi, Josh. Did you want to bring any support with you while you're standing? Why don't you stand at the microphone there? Did you want to bring any family members to support you while you're standing there? Mm-hmm. Or are you good all by yourself?
I'm fine.
You're good? Okay. Well, I want to thank you for coming out today because we met before. Several council members have met you, and we're pretty impressed with what you did. On behalf of the City Council, we're pleased to recognize Josh Eisner. He was a student at Porter Elementary School. He was selected this year. We've got some photos on the screen right now. These are some of the second phase of the project, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And those two council members that were joining in with the RCMP in reinstalling this project. Josh was selected this year to be a recipient of the Ministry of Justice's Crime Prevention and Community Safety Award. The award recognizes Josh as a positive role model with outstanding leadership skills. Josh spearheaded this campaign. It's an anti-bullying initiative inspired by Pink Shirt Day. Josh developed the idea to remind students to take a stand against bullying. Now, all the students at Porter Elementary School painted wooden pink T-shirts to be hung on the school's fence as artwork. Each student at the school painted a shirt and they participated in the project. Tragedy struck, of course, even when the artwork was subsequently torn down by vandals. Josh wanted to put them back up to continue the school's support of anti-bullying, and the day that's photographed there is the day when the RCMP joined with Josh and several members of council and other members of the community to put the shirts back on the fence. And it was a really touching day when these members of the RCMP on their own time came out to do this in support of you. It's wonderful to see such a young person not just think about something, but make a stand and do something about it. On behalf of Coquitlam City Council, we're honored to have you here with us this evening, Josh. And we do want to thank you so much for your efforts. You are indeed a wonderful role model for all of us. I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have anything that you want to say about the project?
It's you need to know that bullying is not acceptable any place, anytime, or anywhere.
Absolutely. Well, that's an important message, and you took it to heart with Pink Aware. It was an absolutely neat project, and we want to acknowledge you for what you've achieved in raising awareness and for bringing the school together in such an important issue. This was well before the recent tragedies that have struck our community. This was way back in, originally it was back last year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you did a great job, and I want to applaud you. And I understand we're doing, Ron's here, so that means that we're going to gather council together and we're going to do a photo. Is that okay with everybody? I didn't warn you about it. Okay. Not first. Okay. You're going to have to try and keep his shiny suit out of the photo.
Powder that suit. You got to stand out, son?
I presented him already, but. Yeah, that's what we'll do. Now, Josh, some members of council have been kind of picking on me because of my November, so I know I will be quiet. You're out of order. Isn't that pretty cool stuff, eh? Now, Josh, I'm hoping it's a school night so you won't have to stay for the rest of the meeting because it won't be nearly as interesting as that first bit. Thank you. Mr. Clerk.
Next item, item 2, is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, November 5th. Recommendation to approve.
Moved by Councillor Rasmussen, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 3 is the minutes of the Maillardville Commercial and Cultural Revitalization Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, October 18th. Recommendation to receive.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 is the Intermunicipal Business Bylaw. The recommendation of the council give first, second, and third readings to Intermunicipal Business License Bylaw 4355. Direct staff to give mobile businesses, as defined in the bylaw, the opportunity to make written representations to council on this bylaw prior to final adoption. And 3, direct staff to give these licenses notice of this intention and the opportunity for them to make representations to council by advertising in the local paper.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I know this has been a long time in coming, and I want to actually extend some thank yous to Councillor Hodge, Councillor Dilworth, and Councillor Forrest from the other communities for working so hard to make this possible. I think this is a good start in showing us what is possible when the 3 communities get together and decide to take on a project. It also speaks to the commitment that I heard from everyone during the last election. I think everyone around this table, as well as the other council tables, talked about the importance of us finding places where we could work together to make these kinds of things happen, to make it easier for all of our residents in our region. And I'm actually pleased to see us doing more together, moving from collaboration to collaboration, because I think that's what this is really about. That one's for you, Terry.
Quite an ad hoc word, isn't it?
Yes, ad hocery. I do think that we ought to be doing more of this, and so I look forward to some bright ideas from around this table and the other 2 tables of what else we could do together, whether it's a social planning table or whether it's, I don't know, come up with something. I'm sure we will. There's lots of places where we can engage in collaboration. So I look forward to the next project. Thank you.
Councillor Rasmussen.
Thank you. And I just want to pass a thanks along to Councillor Hodge. Before I came on council, I was on the Business and Economic Development Committee. Councillor Hodge was on that committee also at that time as non-councillors. And this is an issue that Craig had raised back then as something he's been pushing for many years. And the work that he put on council this time with the other cities to make this come to happen. We had this tried a few years ago on councils. It didn't really come to fruition. So I give Craig and the other 2 city councillors for working together. And this shows our ability to work together, but our also ability to look at cutting our red tape, efficiency our operation in the city of Coquitlam. And we do have a lot of other joint initiatives between the 2 cities that we already cost share. And so this is just another example of being able to work together for the benefit of our taxpayers in all our jurisdictions. So once again, Craig, a good job. Glad to see this is here and it's done. And it's been a few years, but congratulations.
Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, thank you. It has been talked about for a long time, and it probably goes back to the days when I was the president of the Chamber. And I'd just like to acknowledge the Chamber of Commerce for their work on this and helping to move this forward, and also to the staff. And I think we've talked about, both of you mentioned that it was great to see sort of everybody working together. But for somebody who was sort of at the meetings and on the inside to see the staff from the three cities working together and realizing that there was an interest in trying to bring something forward, and that they realized that we realized early on that this was something we probably could do, and I like the word collaboration. I think we're going to use that. I think that's a good one, because really what it was the three cities, the councils and the staff and everybody coming together to see if we really could do something and bring it forward. And I think that what we have proved is that the three cities, we have a lot in common, and there really is a willingness to work together. And this has already come to the other two councils and has been moved along on their first and second, third readings. And I'm pleased to see it come forward here tonight for us. Thank you.
Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. There's been a lot of hard work put into this, and I hope it works, because usually when three municipalities come together, it seems, at a later date, for one reason or another, it seems to fall apart. I hope that this is not the case, and because I know that our fire departments work together in all three municipalities, cooperative, and also the Parks Recreation, as far as the parks on the boundaries are concerned. That if it's on the boundary, Port Moody would look after it. And if Port Moody's Park is on the boundary of Coquitlam, we'll look after, and that's the way it should be. I think it's a great way for cooperation, and hopefully that this is very, very successful, and I'm sure it will be. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I just want to thank Councillor Hodge and also the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Committee on the Chamber as well, that has been looking at this for quite some time before our council actually looked at it. This will make it easier for business to do business in our communities, and so from that perspective, it will be wonderful. It creates a more business-friendly climate. Also, it came at a great time as we were working on the reduction of red tape here at the city as well, and it just kind of meshed with that initiative too. So thank you to all involved.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, and I guess I'm the sixth person to add my thanks and praise and support to this, and I hope that it signals further co-operation among the three cities as well.
It's quite a collaborative initiative, isn't it? One of our big disadvantages as a region has been that we are 22 communities and 22 city halls and 22 business licenses. And I'm really proud that this council and the other councils were able to come together on this one. This has been talked about for decades. This council has talked about it for all the time I've been on it, on council, and I'm just so pleased that we're able to come together with these other two communities. In fact, we've done it with other things. For the first time, perhaps in the history of Coquitlam, we've had dinner meetings with all three councils together, and we discuss issues all the time, the three mayors. That collaboration between our communities, it has to produce these kinds of fruit, this kind of fruit. This is the kind of thing that benefits all of our community. It particularly benefits our business, because you talk about those 22 communities, those 22 business licenses that you'd need if you were a plumber that worked across the Lower Mainland. That's quite ridiculous, and it's a real disadvantage economically for those kinds of mobile businesses that work across our region. So we've perhaps shown the rest of the region how it can be done, sub-region, the Tri-Cities getting together and figuring it out, finding a solution to a problem that's nagged our communities for many, many years. So I'm hats off to everybody that was involved. Hats off to the Chamber for raising this issue many years ago, and hats off to a number of council members. Councillor Reamer raised the issue, Councillor Reid has raised the issue. We've all, I think, talked about this as being a solution that needs to happen And this is perhaps low-hanging fruit and perhaps one of the first steps toward a much more cooperative relationship between our three communities. So I suppose we should pass the bylaw. What do you think? All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries unanimous. Oops, Councillor Hodge was opposed? No, you were in favor of it. Okay. That passes unanimously. Well done.
Item 5 is the development permit. This is the authorization for a 7-unit townhouse development at 491 Laurentian Crescent. The recommendation is that council approve the signing and sealing of this DP and that the mayor city clerk be authorized to execute it.
I move to decline the development variance permit.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Nicholson to decline. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. This was a very contentious piece of property when we first went into it, and the neighborhood has spoken again. There are folks here, you know, we finally, when we got it settled down to the apartment block and the 4 townhouses, even that was distasteful to a lot of the residences. And now we're coming back and asking for 7 units, and it's just too much. It's the density on that is just too much. I think this was one of the first forays outside of the core that we had and that we have in our Austin Heights redevelopment plan, and this is outside of that. I think we've got enough on that piece of property, and they have a permit already in the original application to build 4. I do not see the need to build 7. I think it's just entirely too much on that piece of property, so I will not be supporting 7. Thank you.
Councillor Asmundson.
Well, I'm of the same vein as Councillor Reid. I'm not going to be supporting this application. I looked at the 7 units, 11 parking spaces and 1 visitor, and we have a calculation of 1.5. Now, that might be fine for in the town center, but we're talking a residential area where people are going to be traveling. There's no close shopping by. People need their cars in this area. So you would need at least, to me, 14 parking spaces. The other issue is on Laurentian, you have the Earl Haig Society. There's a bus zone, which I drive for transit. We can't always get into. There's limited parking on Laurentian. There's no parking in the lane, and there's a small bit of parking on Charlene, which doesn't adequately do for the neighborhood in that area. I could see 4 units there with a better parking plan, but 7, as I think has been said already by Councillor Reid, and I agree, is way too much. If somebody was come back with 4 and even a better parking plan than what is presently proposed, I would proceed with that. But this with 7 is just too much for that site. Thank you.
Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. I myself also will not be supporting it. We had a lot of flack with the other building going up there because it was going to be so many stories. This is a 3 stories and 7 units, and I know that piece of land very well. And frankly, what really takes place is that the land value, somebody gets greedy and wants certain prices for their land. When the land is too expensive, to what I understand, that it's something they're asking well in excess of $1 million for this piece of property. The last I heard of it 2 years ago was $900,000 for this piece of property. And to me, that is really reaching. So then the developer has no other choice but say, well, for me to come out on it financially, I have to have certain amount of units. And to me, I don't think that we're going to prostitute ourselves to say you can get all the money you want for that land and the developer can build whatever he wants on it. I mean, it's not our role as a council to start putting units in that busy intersection, for just to, somebody financially to come out on it. So I cannot be supporting it. Sorry.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with everything everybody else has said. Just one further point, major issue for the neighbors when we first looked at the total development of this site was the height of the building, the overshadowing of the neighboring homes. If I look at attachment 3 to the presentation, the roof line on the townhouses proposed lines right up with the adjacent apartment block, although the street line, the streetscape drops. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's not the least bit sensitive to the neighbors. Thank you.
You, Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. And I didn't have the benefit of being here for the first part of the original discussion about this. First off, just a quick little point. I guess because these townhouses, whether it's 4 townhouses or 7 houses, are to the north of the existing single-family residentials, there'll be no shadows. There'll be no shadows because the shadows go the other way. Okay, that's just a small point. Now, what I'm looking at here then is we have a development permit application that talks about no zoning change, no official community plan change. Is what every council colleague who's spoken, is what they're saying is that we have this zoned incorrectly, that this should not be medium density apartment residential, because it's apparently allowed under this. It is allowed under the zoning, and I haven't heard any complaints about the character of this development, which is sort of the fit and finish and that sort of stuff, which is normally the thing that we talk about when we talk about development permits. Is it not? I mean, by that time we've already done the rezoning and everything like that, and so this has been rezoned. This is within the zoning. So I'm just a little confused about what we're actually doing here. Are we setting the stage to rezone this property as well? Because this is allowed in the zoning, it's a fairly attractive development. There is quite a space between the end of the proposed development, the south side of it, and the next house. There's already even denser development on the corner. This will be on the corner to the north of Austin and Laurentian, and there'll be less dense development with this townhouse, whether it's 4 townhouses or 7. So I'm just a little perplexed about the route of and where this is leading. I mean, and if we want to rezone this into some lower density of some sort, then that's another issue. But in terms of the development permit, I'm having a hard time opposing it.
You, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. If Councillor Neal had waited till I spoke, then he would hear that I actually don't like the massing. I think it's very clunky, and when I look at the original proposal that I understand that the present developer is not responsible for, but it's the one that the neighborhood understood that they would get, there was clearly a distinction between the 2 buildings and the massing between the 2 buildings, that the townhouse portion would be shorter, lower than the larger building, and that was my understanding in terms of what we would get in terms of what that structure would look like. And then the one that's before us is much higher, much heavier, much top heavier, and I think overpowers the single family houses, and is actually not I don't see it as a good transition. I mean, that's what I was hoping for, was something that would transition between the 2, and I actually experienced this development as heavier even than the Earl Haig building itself. So something that has a softer design that wouldn't stand out as much. It becomes the focal point. And I don't think that that's what the neighborhood intended, and so I'm not going to be supporting this development because I don't think it fits with the character of the neighborhood.
You, Councillor Nicholson again.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd reiterate the point that Councillor Robinson made. It's the massing. We talk about, Councillor O'Neill mentioned character. It's form and character, and it's form that's bothering me here. It's height, mass, I think I used the word overshadowing. I'm not saying it'll shadow properties, Councillor O'Neill, but it's that overhanging, the massive building over your backyard, whatever direction the sun shines through. The property fits within the zone. I'm not sure. One of the lines in this report, which I thought we wouldn't need to talk about, but maybe we will, is it meets many of the development permit guidelines. Well, that begs the questions, which ones doesn't it meet? I don't know. It doesn't meet all of them, apparently. And it doesn't meet my criteria for suiting the neighborhood, for fitting in with what people believed they were getting when they came to a public hearing, spoke their minds about what they wanted to see developed on this site a couple of years ago. Thank you.
You. Myself, I have some concerns, and they're not the same as, well, as some of my own concerns. And among my concerns are the process that produced the comments. We've got 7 comments, 6 of them opposed to the project. These are the written comments, and I'll go with those. None of them that are opposed are comfortable with the zoning. And this isn't the zoning. This is there are going to be townhouses on this property. And I've got people that said it's never been brought up as townhouses. Well, it's been rezoned as townhouses. It's been public hearing as townhouses, and there's been a development permit as townhouses. So it was extensively discussed as townhouses. There's an opposition to there being 2 years of construction. Well, no matter what's going to be built here, it's going to be 2 years of construction. And another comment that said it should be single family. Well, it's not going to be single family. It's zoned for townhouses, and that's the challenges I've got with the public process. Now, granted, the staff didn't run the public process. It was run by the architect for the applicant, and the forms thus they weren't very clear that whatever gets built here, the question is this the right set of townhouses? I actually don't think this is a particularly good set of townhouses. I have those concerns with it, but I am frustrated that the residents in the neighborhood who are opposed to this seem to think that it's going to be single family. It has never been planned to be single family, and so we've got that disconnect to get over. In the end, I think we ended up with, I believe it's at least 1 too many units. On the property, the lapsed development permit was for 4 units, and I'd be willing to entertain or at least give some thought to how we might put a 5th or a 6th in there. But I think we just went too far with 7. Councillor Reamer.
I too think we went too far with the 7. I think probably 4 would have been a better number, and perhaps you could squeeze 5 or 6 in, as you just said. I do want to comment on the public consultation because I'm not certain that dropping packages off to people is the way to consult, and because it completely lacks context. There's nobody there to explain the context of this. And so I think in the future, I would like to see some other form of public consultation other than dropping packages off to people. I don't even know of these 7 responses that were received. I don't know if these were received from people that were actually spoken to or not. So those are my comments. I'm not going to support this application. Thank you.
Well, let's be clear here. I gather that the staff didn't give any. Okay, Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Good evening. Having been involved with the prior application, the rezoning and DP, staff were keenly aware of some of the concerns in the neighborhood. And so when this application came forward with that in mind, we really urged the applicant to reach out to inform the neighbors around what they're proposing, ask if they had any questions, try to provide that information to them, recognizing that this wasn't a rezoning process with bylaw readings and a public hearing. It was simply a DP. So the applicant was good enough to take staff's urging on that point, and so they conducted a bit of an informal knock on the door. There's some form to it, but that's the responses they got back. We had asked them to reach out, talk with the neighborhood. If there's any questions, try to have that discussion and address their concerns.
A somewhat light agenda tonight, so we're going to just suspend the normal single-time around rules. We'll go to Councillor Reid.
Thank you. The amount of angst that this development created when it was first proposed to us to put an apartment block up there and to put all of these other buildings on it was just it was really quite horrendous for the neighborhood. And all of us got many calls and letters, and we had a lot of folks here for the public hearing. And at the end of the day, Council approved what is now on the property, and part of that rezoning was including the 4 townhouses. And that was for market. It was to try and settle off the sort of the economic development portion of the whole site. 4 townhouses, it completes it, and that's what the neighborhood in the end settled for and reluctantly, I might say, agreed to. For us to come back now and allow 7 units on there, that's just, to me, it's betraying the confidence that that neighborhood has in me. I can't speak for the rest of you, and I simply won't do that.
Thank you. For the second time, Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, if, you know, we rezoned it for 4 townhouses, then it goes to 7 without a public hearing, I got a great problem with that. I really do. Because the substantive changes to what the land use, what was voted on before by council. So, you know, I don't know about the charter, municipal charter, or the charters that we have, or whatever it may be. But frankly, years ago, if there was just one townhouse difference, or there was a difference in the building envelope, or whatever it was, it went back to public hearing. And to me, I think we should hold our feet to the fire and do the same thing. I don't think we should throw in some shockers to the neighborhoods when we don't have to. I mean, 4 townhouses, people can buy it, they know it's 4 townhouses. But somehow tonight, being able to grant them a permit, execute the permit on behalf of the city of Coquitlam, all you're doing is throwing a shocker to them. All of a sudden the neighborhood sees 7 townhouses in there. How can it happen? Should be a public hearing on it, automatically, without a question. So that really is bothering me to no end. You know, that somehow something like this could slip through without another public hearing. It really bothers me.
Okay, and in fairness, something like this can't slip through without another public hearing. We can't impose another public hearing. The Act says there's a public hearing at rezonings. We have issued the zoning for this and a development permit. This is essentially an amendment to a development permit. Back to Mr. McIntyre.
Just trying to increase it to 7.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship, and you're correct in this case, because the rezoning has gone through, and at that time, yes, there was a different development permit for this portion of the site that showed 4 units. The zoning was approved at that time, and the development permit can remain, the application can remain current for up to 2 years. After 2 years, the development permit application lapses, so you then have this bit of an oddity where you have a property that has multifamily zoning with no development permit. The application that's come forward is consistent with the zoning that's on the property, but as we hear around the table, there are some concerns around the design of it. If I could suggest, Your Worship, I'm just thinking back to the original application, because I think it went around the block a few times too to address concerns, you know, in terms of the siting of the building, the heights. If council is willing, I would suggest maybe just defer on it for now, and staff can take it back and try to deal with the applicant to address those concerns. That might be one option for council's consideration.
I don't want 7 units.
Okay. What's before us now is, and oddly enough, and my last words on this, none of the people that are opposed to this project mentioned anything about 7. These are not people who are opposed to 7 units versus 4. These are people who are opposed to townhouses. by and large. Now, there are 3 that didn't identify the reason for their opposition, and I don't know what their reason was. But the ones that did mention anything, it's related to the land use decision on the zoning, which isn't up to be re-questioned. And that's a challenge that we're going to have to try to work with applicants so that they better understand what they're trying to inform the residents of, so they get better quality input at this stage when we try to go out for public input. I remind Council this is a negative motion. The motion before us to decline. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor O'Neill is opposed. The motion carries.
Item 6 is a zoning bylaw text amendment to permit temporary sales centers on multifamily residential construction sites. This is bylaw 4368. Recommendations that Council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4368, and that bylaw 4368 be referred to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Asmundson. Councillor Robinson.
This might sound like a really silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So are they required to have a business license for these sales centers?
That's a good question. I believe so, but I'd have to check with the with staff. We can report that back at the time of the public hearing. It may. No, I'm pretty sure they would. If it's being carried on as a separate business operation on that site, I think it's different from the actual development construction of the property. But I will make note of that, and we'll have that clarification for you.
Thank you.
Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, I know this is going to public hearing, and I will be listening to the public at that hearing. I'm pleased to see that this has come forward, because I know that I have been approached about the suitability of some sales centers, and I think this is a great solution. So I'll look forward to the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you, Mr. McIntyre. I have a question, and it's I can understand for multifamily high-rise for a sales center due to their need for the financing to help get through the construction of it. But we're also talking about single-family residential. And I guess my concern is if we're building single-family residential, they place a trailer on the site, and they have as I read in the report, they have to have an approved subdivision plan. But can they start marketing those houses prior to servicing and prior to the registration of lots? Are they going to? And I'm just worried when we talk about the property that the developer went under on, what type of liabilities if we're talking single-family homes, if anything happens. Because from what I understand, they can take deposits for future sales of houses held with a lawyer, but how far on single-family? And is there some, I just have some concerns, because right now we require a single-family developer to have his servicing in lots registered before you can start selling them. And are they going to be able to get ahead of the curve on this and the implications of that?
Okay. Through the chair, in the bylaw amendments that are being proposed for single family, one of the conditions that there need to be final subdivision plan approval. And so that's to give some assurance that we know where the lots are, what the size of the lots are. People know what they're buying. And there's been some debate of late around this. We've actually got a show home policy we've got to bring back to council, because it kind of relates to that. And that is, at what point can you commence construction of single-family dwellings on a subdivision? And basic services obviously need to be in there. So that's, and I think we'll be consistent with that, the sales center could then be one of those initial show homes that would then be, by the zoning, permitted to operate as that sales center. So it would happen after the subdivision is approved, a basic level of servicing being in there, water, sewer, drainage, and road access.
Okay, I'll let this go to public hearing, but I still have some concerns about making sure the balance, the playing field between the smaller builders and a larger builder are the same when we're getting into this, and not creating an advantage over somebody else that hasn't taken and selling before they've really done a lot of the servicing.
Okay. I only have one question, and that was related to F on the bylaw itself, or the last bullet on page 2 of the staff report, which says must be removed the sales center must be removed once the development has received building occupancy. Now, there are developers that don't pre-sell as much, and might actually only market. There are a few developers that only market once the building has received occupancy, and so they're automatically at a disadvantage because they're not allowed to have a sales center in the building that is now perfectly safe because it now has a. Is it intended? I'm trying to understand how that rule came about.
Yeah, Your Worship. To be honest, that kind of jumped out at me the second time I read the report, and just why we're setting that as a threshold. Let me discuss that with staff that work more directly on it, and as it proceeds to public hearing, we can speak to that more fully as to what the rationale was. You're right. There's some cases where sales may continue well after the final occupancy has been issued. So why would we have them pull the plug sooner? So let me take that question back to the staff involved, and we can try to respond at that time.
Okay. Along the same lines, then, you look at the. Okay, I'm on the bylaw again. The bylaw 2B, sub 4, the B and C. B says provide a minimum of 2 off-street parking spaces. I'm looking at, say, Morningstar's residential single-family neighborhood. Does the sales center have 2 off-street parking spaces? Well, it doesn't. Because that's not how sales centers normally get developed in those kinds of settings. So on the single-family side, it wouldn't work. The sales center is in the garage, which is where the off-street parking would normally be. C, must be sited a minimum of 1.5 meters away from active construction. Taking Oasis, for example, the sales center is separated from the active construction site by a really thick firewall, about 8 inches thick, but not 1.5 meters thick. So I'm trying to figure out whether it just seems to me we've thrown some requirements in there that don't provide any real benefit and provide a real barrier to the idea that the sales center could be a firewall away from the construction site, and everyone is more than safe from the construction given the way in which it's laid out. So I don't think it was intended to do that. So I throw those both at you, and I'm sure we'll be able to amend them if necessary at public hearing, or just later. Preferably with staff recommendations. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none. Motion is first reading in a public hearing. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 is preliminary OCP amendment and rezoning report to accommodate a 7-unit seniors housing project within Southwest Coquitlam, in particular 352 Marmont Street. Recommendations that Council give first reading to City Coquitlam Citywide Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 4365, first reading to City Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4366, and that these 2 bylaws be referred to public hearing.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Reid.
Oh, thank you. There's only 1 visitor parking for 7 units, is that correct?
That's correct.
And the street parking will be non-existent because it's on Marmont?
Yeah, there's Marmont's on the east side. There's that frontage there, and then the other, the south side is almost entirely taken up by access into the driveway.
Street parking's not non-existent, so that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. These 7 units for seniors, and they're going to have something untitled for over 65. Are these going to be, because it's BC Housing, is it going to be care units, like people that need some kind of medical care, or is it just for folks over 65? Like a regular small apartment block?
Through the chair, my understanding is no. It's just simply seniors living accommodation. There may be some income assistance, but beyond that, there are mobile, healthy people.
No home care or anything built in. Okay, thank you very much.
Good, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Assuming that this housing is for seniors in need, will these units be accessible?
Physically accessible.
Yes.
Mr. McIntyre.
I would think so, but to the degree that they are accessible, I don't have that information top of hand, but I can top of mind. But I can.
I promise
relate.
I'll be asking.
Yeah, I should anticipate that. We will. Actually, I'm glad to see that the representatives of the applicants are here tonight, and so getting these questions out now is very helpful, so they can be prepared for the public hearing.
Great. I also just want to provide comment, I guess, on the public consultation that's happened to date. and just how disappointed I am around the concern expressed about the kinds of people who are going to be living here. Seniors in need, folks. Not all seniors have enough money to stay in this community, and providing housing for those folks who are on limited income, who can't afford to either stay in their homes or can't afford market rent. And what you're saying is you don't want those people in your neighborhood really always for me is cause for concern. I look forward to the public hearing and to hearing what the neighbors actually do have to say about bringing more affordable housing to seniors in their community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, I look forward to the public hearing as well, because there are several important issues here. One of them, and I want to see how the public thinks about them. I think, judging by the many of the responses that were opposed to this in the initial public outreach, there's some concern about the building being too big and not fitting in and things like this because it's a single family and duplex area. But to my mind at this stage, the design looks very sensitive to the area. It doesn't look anything like it would be a 7-unit apartment. I think it's a very nice looking, very sensitive design. So maybe when that's more well known and more people get to look at it, the public opinion will change. On the other hand, we are going around the city now and really asking for more densification, and there's been areas rezoned and reclassified, and so this is an area that's already official community plan for neighborhood attached residential, and the current zoning already is for 2-story low density apartment residential. And here this is a request to go back and make it even more dense, essentially. So that's an issue, and again, it's sort of what message do we send if we've already got densification in the zoning? I want people to, I want Coquitlam residents to get on board with our affordable housing densification strategies that we have. And if there's a fear out there that, well, there's going to be one level of densification, then we might come back later and densify again, that could be a concern. So I want to hear from the public on this as well. But again, this is it's a very sensitive looking design, but it does represent densification. So there's a big issue for us to tackle here. I'm looking forward to the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, I too was going to ask the question. It's independent living as opposed to assisted living. So these people will be on their own, able to look after themselves and what have you. I too actually really like the look of this. It looks like a regular home, actually. It really doesn't have that apartment look to it. So I think, as Councillor O'Neill mentions, it is a very sensitive design. I hope that all the people who have provided feedback will come out to our public hearing, and that others will come out to our public hearing as well. Because, of course, densification can be very controversial. And the more people we hear from, the better it is. So I'll be looking forward to that. Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. In saying we'll covenant this that for people over 65, does that mean both occupants if there's a couple? If I'm 72 and my darling wife is 53, may we live there? Well, you've all seen my wife. You know how young she is.
I'm surprised she's that old.
I'll report what you've said. Thank you.
You should be so lucky. The housing agreement, since it is targeted at seniors, it calls for that 65 age. I'm not sure offhand whether in instances like that a couple, one member is under that age, whether there's discretion or not. Again, it's a question I can take back. I would think it's fairly close. It probably wouldn't be an issue, but it may also relate to BC Housing's funding support as well. So they may have some other criteria that kick in. But I'll take the question back.
Okay, and the other is, given that it's a seniors place and it's 2 stories, will there be an elevator or some provision for moving people between floors, or stairs only? And again, that may be something we only learn at the public hearing.
I don't know the detailed interior design, but I would doubt that there'd be an elevator. There may be a lift, but it would be focused on a stairwell if that's the only means.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had actually similar concerns to Councillor Robinson. Reading through the letters was enlightening and troublesome. What happens if there's 28 people? Well, these are seniors. It's not being designed for 28 people. What if they're going to be recovering drug addicts? Well, they're seniors. They may have loud parties, but it's probably going to be James Last, not rock and roll. Marijuana use will probably be somewhat limited. It troubles me when we see concerns about rental, which is what those are. They're about affordable rental units, being translated into concerns about the kinds of people that rent. And so I'd be interested in what the public says at the public hearing, but I want the public to hear that exactly what this is and to open their eyes to what the application is. We need seniors housing in our community. We need seniors to be housed affordably and in neighborhoods. There was even a concern that Marmont is already a freeway. Well, this is a housing unit that probably won't contribute to the speed of cars going from Como Lake down to Brunette. It won't be able to contribute to that. It won't make it worse, and it won't make it any better. But those who write that they are very uncomfortable with having affordable rental apartments in our neighborhood, that makes me more likely to vote in favor of it. It really bothers me that we need affordable rental. We certainly need affordable seniors rental, so I'd urge the public when they come to the public. I'll be supporting this, and I suspect it will go to public hearing. I'd urge the public when they come to public hearing to have their concerns about the project and about the land use, but not about the kinds of people that live in rental housing. Councillor Asmundson and then Councillor Sikora.
Well, this project I'm going to support through the public hearing. I think the building itself and the change is going to be an improvement to what's existing there and what's existingly some problems for the neighborhood of not being well kept. I think this will be a far better kept unit and it looks a lot better than what is existing. The one concern I do have is the parking on the site. We've got 7 units, 7 parking stalls, and 1 visitor with very limited on-street parking, which means we're going to have spillage into the neighborhood. Because just because they're seniors doesn't mean they're going to have 1 car. They can still probably have 2 cars. And the area that it's in is not a easy walk for people 65 or to go for shopping or different things. So people are going to have cars. So my one issue about this whole site is the lack of parking on site for it because of the limitations of the street parking available around it. And so that's something I'd like to see the applicants go back and take a look at, see if they can adjust their program, add in some more parking. I do think their development is going to make an improvement at this site when it existingly is there and improve the neighborhood in its lifestyle and quietness. But the parking is the big issue for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much, Mayor. You know, when I read through this, what bothers me, I'm going to see it go to public hearing, listen to public hearing. But some of the comments are made that somehow crime in the area will increase. Can you imagine 65 years old and higher will create some crime in the area? I mean, my God, you know, that is really reaching. Or some of them will say, well, I don't want any renters around my place. I mean, you know, somehow that the renters are low-class people or people that haven't got a right to live. I mean, my God, a young couple that gets married, they're not going to buy a house right away. They couldn't afford it. So they have to rent and that type of deal. So, you know, I mean, I know in my case, I got married at age 18, and my first house that I bought, although I had the money before, but I never did because I was in business, and the business needed attention as far as financial is concerned. So my first house I was probably in my 30s or 40s when I bought my first house. You know, we rented all the time. Did that mean to say that, I was a renter, so I had to be a bad guy? There's no way I should be living in any neighborhood next to somebody who owns a house because, by God, this guy has got to be a bad guy. He's a renter. How bad are those comments? You know, you hear those kind of comments and that turns you off right away to say, what kind of people would be putting these kind of letters out? Anyways, I'm going to see it go to public hearing and see what comes out of the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sikora. Standing up for those of you seniors who aren't criminals. Any further comments? The motion is first reading and public hearing. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8 is a proposed zoning bylaw text amendment. This is for subdivision regulations related to minimum lot size. The bylaw number is 4362. The recommendation is that Council give first reading to see Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4362 and that bylaw 4362 be referred to public hearing.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Asmundson.
Thank you. I get the gist of this whole bylaw, and I understand it, but we did have a bylaw and we were talking about giving the authority to the approving officer about reducing the minimum width on some RS7, RS8 type lots. And we sort of debated about the depth of the 10% or whatever. So I understand that there's going to be some lots configuration that need this, but is there I guess what I'm trying to find out why I didn't see is there like a 10%, 15%, 20% reduction is in the size of a lot to make it fit in that area? I'm just trying to, I understand the need because you do wind up from occasion, land isn't all flat and square and you're going to have some odd shapes at the end. I'm just trying to get some detail on that part.
Good point. And no, we're not putting any sort of rules of thumb. It's a 10% or 15% or 20% margin because the thinking here, particularly the first part, is to make things better. And that is the consolidation piece where you may have a lot or two lots that are actually less than the minimum parcel size under that zoning. What this would propose to do is enable the subdivision approving officer to approve a subdivision that would consolidate those two lots. So in fact, the end result would be a larger one lot that's larger. It may not meet the minimum, but at least it's moving in the right direction. And with that as well, it would provide the approving officer with discretion. If they felt they didn't see it as being advantageous, it could then still be referred to council and then go through the rezoning process to put it in the proper zone. So there is always a fallback to council. The second piece is, and this is more really of convenience, we've seen this happen a number of times of late, where there may be a road realignment happening. So there's a portion of existing road that's being closed. So it's being closed as a highway and title's being raised as a lot. And often it's just sort of an interim condition, but it does require a subdivision plan the approving officer has to sign. And again, so it might be less than the minimum lot size in that zone. But this would enable the approving officer to do that, but with the thinking that that lot would be there as a interim condition. It would then be consolidated with other lands around to create the ultimate complying parcel.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
I opposed the last one we had where we have staff being able to reduce frontages when we're doing small. And I have great difficulties with this one too. Brent was on the right track when he asked, is there going to be sort of any minimum that you can do? What's the what's the least amount that you can forgive. So, because we could end up having some pretty strange-looking lots around. We've got some in the redevelopment areas. We've got some laneways and things, and so I'm going to look forward to what you have to say at the public hearing. But I can see this has a lot of pitfalls in it, so I'll move it on to public hearing. But be forewarned. Thank you.
Sounded like a threat. Okay. Any further comments? The motion is first reading and public hearing. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 9 is a conservation permit. This conservation permit is for 4104 Cedar Drive and the surrounding properties located between Deveon and Freemont Streets. The recommendation is that Council approve and authorize the issuance of this conservation permit with conditions to One World Farms located at 4104 Cedar Drive and adjacent properties.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I wanted to talk to you about page 2 in elevations. The 1, 2, 3rd paragraph down, which will raise the general site elevation up to the 100-year flood elevation as approved by the ALC, which reflects the fill elevation approved for in all other phases. So will this be higher than the surrounding neighborhood lands, or is this going to bring it up to the elevation that they are?
Through the chair, by and large, the site will be higher than those lands around that haven't been filled, and that is because in placing the fill on there, it's necessary to be above the flood elevation. So if you're creating usable properties, and particularly those you're going to be setting dwellings on, it has to be above a certain flood elevation. Now, I believe there's some properties a little further east on Cedar Drive, I think just beyond this property. This goes back a few years ago. Councillor Reid may recall there's some questions about some fill in that area as well. So I would think that as the surrounding lands are developed or more effectively utilized, they too would be filled up to meet that flood elevation.
So all I'm concerned about is that this particular piece of property will have houses and horses and whatever else on it. And how much higher is it going to be than the neighborhood properties? And are they still in active blueberry farming there? Like, are we going to have everything flooded or not? That's my concern.
Yeah. And it's understandable. Again, typically the blueberry fields aren't elevated. They're, in fact, if anything, they're excavated out. Right. In this case, you're working at a couple of different things. First, the fill level to meet floodplain elevation. But on the site itself, and that's why this has been a little bit of a drawn-out process, because it is quite a complicated series of properties. There's a series of water courses and little marshes and ponds and that. So those are the areas that can't be touched for environmental reasons. So basically, you'll be creating sort of islands across the site where there can be the dwellings, barns, and usable area. The remainder would then be for the drainage to be diverted to that, and then on out to the slough. So a portion of the site would be higher. They would be obligated to make sure that another drainage came from that high property down onto the low property outside their property boundaries.
Okay, so you're satisfied that we have all the geotech, all the engineering, everything that we need?
Your Worship, this one has been through the grinder. It's been worked very closely. There's a number of agencies that have been involved, and we wouldn't bring it forward unless we were confident.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
I have a couple of other concerns, and that relates to our experience on the site in the past. There was one day when I dropped by the site and I was told that the parking lot on the south side of the Beauville Slough was their private property and that we weren't allowed to be on it. We subsequently followed up, I guess staff followed up, and the owner apologized. They found it more convenient if they didn't allow, if they made people park on the parking lot on the north side. I see that at the top of page 3 that the applicant has been requested that the de Beauville Slough parking lot and park trails be kept open at all times. I was surprised at the gentleness of the language, since the parking lot and the trails don't belong to them, and for them not to keep them open at all times would be trespass. So I want to be assured that they're not going to treat park users with disdain. And the second one is the hours. We've had complaints about the amount of noise that they're creating earlier in the morning. I see their hours of operation are 9 to 5, Monday to Friday only, but I'm still left with those complaints we've received in the past. And these aren't complaints from Coquitlam residents, but even so, they're
7 a.m.
not according to the, 7 a.m. Oh, this is the revision. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. Well, the revision says 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., and I'm not in favor of anymore. So I don't know how to deal with that. We've had complaints about the amount of noise. What 7 a.m. means is normally the excavator starts at 6:30 because he wants to warm up, and by the time our bylaw guys gets there at 7 o'clock and they're allowed to operate, and the way that this particular landowner has operated a couple of times has led me to have hesitation here. Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. And first, I apologize because in the report, as originally signed and submitted, showed 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday. The file manager actually was re-reviewing the report today and caught that as a mistake. And so that's why the revised page has been provided for working hours 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now, this is interesting to note because this is actually one of the conditions in the conservation permit. So this is something that council may want to turn their minds to. You are stipulating those conditions. So it's part of the framework for the issuance of this conservation permit. If there's an interest to have a little later start for construction activity, as long as it's reasonable, that would something could be considered.
Yes, I'm interested in a different start time. We've got an elementary school on the Port Coquitlam side on the approach and an elementary school on the Coquitlam side on the approach, and I think encouraging truck traffic earlier than it needs to start is something we should put our minds to, or discouraging. And in this particular instance, I'm left with the experience in the past being somewhat disrespectful by reports of the neighbors, and I suspect that 9 a.m. would be the 8 hours beginning at 9 a.m. would be a good start, and I can't move that, so. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you. My issue about changing this for one area is we allow construction throughout the rest of the city and neighborhoods with housing at 7 a.m. And the issue I have right now, I live beside a site where all housing is going on. And yes, Mayor, they do start up at 6:30, 6:40, and they wake me up or whatever. So either you're going to make a blanket change for all construction in the city, because where I live, there's an elementary school, there's trucks and stuff coming by that we try to not go by that way. But I think to take one area out and say these guys are 9 a.m. and the rest of people that have construction and everything during Monday to Friday is 9 a.m. and everybody else is 7 a.m. doesn't show an equitable balance for everybody. What I would like to see, and I've talked with Mr. McIntyre, is Saturdays. I would like to see it 9 a.m. I think when I have construction starting up beside me at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning is a little much. Councillor Hodge has been through this, and we've been through this. And so I think to say this one area, you get special treatment at 9 a.m., where we all have the different families, schools, and everything by that area, is inconsistent. So I won't, unless you're going to make it a blanket policy to all construction in the city, I don't think that's going to work. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, any further discussion?
Well, I would like that clarified, Your Worship.
Well, there's nothing to clarify. Right now it's 7 a.m. There's something to amend if you want to amend, but there's not. It doesn't require clarification. It requires amendment.
But it also says Monday to Friday here, and no work work to take place on weekends on this, but in here it doesn't say that. So I'd like to know which one.
Now, the conservation permit was pretty clear, and I think the staff report said the same thing on page 3 at the top, that it was, well, there it said 9 a.m., but that's been...
This is the revised page 3. So which page 3 am I working on? The one in the...
Well, the revised one says 7 to 5, Monday to Friday only, and no work to take place on weekends or set.
And this one doesn't say that. So which one am I working on? The revised?
Which one? The revised is the correct one, but the original one said the same thing.
Yeah.
Monday to Friday only. Didn't spell out stats, so a stat Monday would, under the old one, the staff report, but it's covered in the bylaw itself. So, is there an amendment related to time or anything? Seeing none. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. There was previously a Phase 1 permit issued first, I think. Then Phases 2 and 3 issued together. In the staff report it says, as the term for the previous approval has recently concluded, 1-year time extension is required to enable completion. When did those previous permits expire, previous permissions?
I'm sorry, Your Worship. I think if you turn over to
it tells us when they began.
Yeah.
First one issued January 17th, or council approval January 17th, 2011, and then again on July 25th, 2011 for Phases 2 and 3. If those permits were for 1 year, then the Phase 1 expired 11 months ago, and the Phase 2 and 3 expired 5 months ago. Is that correct?
And that's my understanding, yes. And what happened, they got started with the Phase 1 works, but there was the balance of the Phase 1 works. They're still awaiting some environmental analysis, and so they can only go so far in Phase 1, and then once that analysis was done and it was reviewed, I believe, with the DFO and the Land Commission, they're now in a position to sort of reactivate the Phase 1. At the same time, they're asking for an extension for the Phase 2 and 3 portion.
Phase 2 and 3, which expired in July.
Yes.
So presumably they haven't been working since. Nothing been going on the site from July till now.
I can't answer that question. I don't believe so. But
maybe I'd ask rather than when did the proponent approach us about extending the permits? Before or after July 25th?
There was discussion before that. It takes some time, particularly with the communication with the Land Commission. There's often a lapse of a number of weeks, if not months, between requests coming in and reviews and that. I imagine it's been underway since before the expiry date of that Phase 2 and 3.
And so now we're told we're being asked for a 1-year extension in order to allow completion. What's my level of confidence that completion will occur in that 12 months? Or sometime in the summer of 2014, we'll be looking for another extension to a permit that expired 6 months before.
Your Worship, I'm sorry I don't have fuller answers to give you tonight.
You don't have the crystal ball.
And well, no, I don't. This doesn't need a crystal ball. What this needs is an applicant present who can answer some of these questions. And I don't believe the applicant is in the room. So, if council,
the applicants are in the room. I assume they're the ones taping us. These are the videos also.
I'm
available.
Sorry. Good. Maybe with council's indulgence, if there's some detailed questions I'm unable to answer, if.
Is there a representative of the applicant that wishes to answer any questions that we might have? Would you come forward and state your name and address for the record at the microphone, please?
Thank you. My name is Aftardel, and I'm the owner of the property.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Councillor.
rather than specific questions, I think you've heard some of the concerns. Maybe you'd like to speak briefly to what time work starts and finishes and the level of disturbance to the neighbors, and what has been happening since the permit expired. When did you begin to work on renewing the permit that was going to expire in July? And do you really expect to complete within 12 months? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for giving us an opportunity to be able to answer those questions. You know, this has been an extremely lengthy process, and I remember the comments from the council when it first started that, you know, good luck to you. This is going to be a difficult process, and it's been more than more than difficult and challenging because of the regulatory requirements, the ALC, and everything. And I can assure you that we have been working extremely closely with the City of Coquitlam in addressing all of those issues. Yes, if you start at 6:59, we're pretty well guaranteed that there is going to be a call, and the City of Coquitlam has been right on it, and we've addressed any issues. We have no desire to control any public lands that are adjacent to us, and I'm not exactly sure how, you know, some of the comments came about, but we have been very much interested in being able to do this fill operation in compliance with the ALC and the requirements, and to be able to, quote, develop this. And there's been lots of misconceptions, and we've needed to deal with it. In terms of the application process, yes, well before, months before, we have brought that up with the City of Coquitlam. What is the process? What do we need to do? And then we have, it's taken this many months to be able to bring this application forward, even though we requested it. The phase one, there was an extension. It did not need to go through the council approval process. This, unfortunately, has been broken up into pieces. It's a contiguous site of 33 acres, and it had to be broken up for multiple reasons. And this is a last little portion of this entire site. Phase one is complete. Phase two is complete. Phase three has a little bit of work that's required, and that should be done relatively soon. But it's really dependent on the weather gods and the fill amounts, and that's the only thing that can really derail this. But we're certainly feel very confident that we can be able to get this done within 1 year extension. But certainly we have been working very closely to be able to bring this to, in fact, we didn't know that it had to go back to council because this is a hole in the middle of the rest of the fill, right? To us, it was pretty obvious that you need to complete this piece in order to not create a bunch of islands and so forth. So this is the last part of the fill operation, and then we would move to you know, basically work on the site to be able to complete it to the specifications that we've indicated in our initial application.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
It is helpful.
Thank you.
Sorry, sir. Sorry. My comments about the start time, we very seldom do we get a chance after we issue a development permit to have the developer apply again, because they usually complete their work all the way through to the end of the development permit. And so if they start early or anything, there's not much we can do. So my comments were about, please don't start early. And your flag person can't commandeer public land and those sorts of things. I do appreciate, though, you've made your case, I think, from my perspective, well. I appreciate your coming in. Thank you.
Once again, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Okay. No other comments? Question is a conservation, a dirt permit. All in favor? Opposed? You have it unanimously, sir.
Item 10 is a preliminary report on an application for a zoning amendment and bylaw. This is bylaw 4364, and it's for the property at 1408 Austin Avenue. Recommendations to give first reading to see if Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw 4364 and refer bylaw 4364 to public hearing.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Asmundson, did you have something on this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Asmundson.
Yeah, this one here, once again, I'm going to be sounding like a bit of a broken record, but...
okay, then Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. It's about the parking once again. We have 4 units 7 parking stalls, 1 visitor on a unit. They're building 4 units to the maximum what they could get on this site. On Austin Avenue, where you have no off-street parking, a laneway where you have no extra parking, and I know we have our housing choices. We've got a variety of issues. I would be more comfortable with this rather than being in a 4-plex, be a 3-plex, and adding more parking into it. I could support that better. But when I look at this here, and I look at the density coming on that site, the difficulty of no parking on Austin, no side street parking, a laneway, and I just see some issues of spillage onto Charlotte and other areas that people come over. So, and I've seen some of our things have been coming out at the maximum of 4 units in this housing choice. I don't think it always has to be 4. I think this would be a better site for 3, possibly, and increasing the parking in this area due to the restrictions of parking availability. So those are my comments. Thank you.
I didn't have, actually, we'll vote to support this going for public hearing. I didn't have any, I didn't have those concerns. I thought this was actually the right kind of site for what we talked about, what we toured in other communities. This is a large lot. It's less than a meter shy of being large enough for a quadruplex. So they could, they're that close to being able to build those 4 units anyway. It's 1,000 square feet larger than the minimum required lot size for that, and I think it actually works quite well. We've toured a lot of projects where 2 of the required spaces were on the street in front, but those are not reliable spaces. They can be used by other people as well. And so in this particular instance, they've had to accommodate that somewhere else. I think they're shy of 1 space myself, but I think this is actually a very good land use all the way along Austin. I look forward to seeing what how the public receives that sort of thing. I'm so pleased to see one come before us finally in the form that we looked at and all applauded when they were out in North Vancouver. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. You sort of took the words out of my mouth. This reminds me of what we saw in North Vancouver that we all were just agog about because it was just such a great use of land and such an interesting way of placing the housing so that there was sufficient privacy and a more intensive land use, which is exactly what we talk about for infill. I just want to confirm that, and what I thought was interesting was this idea of making sure that there were basements that didn't have direct access to outside so that there's no possibility of basement suites. But it's a way to actually get more house for your land, and so I just want to confirm that that's the case. I read it, but I think that's going to be. I expect to get some of that angst at the public hearing, that people will be concerned about that, but that we've taken care of that way. Okay, just getting a nod from our general manager is great. I look forward to hearing what the public has to say about it. I think they look just beautiful in the diagrams, so I look forward to hearing more about them. Thank you.
Actually, on that, sorry, we're being flexible tonight. On the basement, I noticed the floor space is about 2,000 a unit, including the basement, which suggests that it's about 8,000 square feet, which is about what they could build in a single large house on this property. So I think we're going to get some objection to how this is too crowded on the lot or something, and yet you could build a bigger house than that as one big unit. And it would house 1 family and probably a 2nd family in a legal suite and very possibly several others and potentially more than the 4 that we're counting on doing here. This is a really affordable, the only way to get single-family lots in Coquitlam to be affordable for the average family. A 2,000 square foot house, it's a right family-sized house on a lot, smaller lot, obviously, because they're sharing it with 3 others. But ultimately, those families will be really well served, and we'll be able to populate our schools this way much better than if we allow the continual construction of monster houses with multiple suites. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, just very generally, I thought this is an ideal location for this sort of development, and I do like the arrangement of the homes and the parking. When I went to the site a couple of days ago and looked at it and then looked at the plans, and I was wondering, yeah, it's too bad they couldn't get an 8th parking space in there to have 2 for each, but I think that's a small price to pay for this. I'm just one little technical question, and I haven't noticed this before, but because of the discussion about the underground part of this, the cellar/basement, I see that it's described as a cellar here. Is that the normal usage? Do we say basement sometimes, or do we say cellar all the times? And if we do have 2 different terms, do they mean different things?
That's a good question. In the staff report and how we regard it, it's a basement. I think it's just maybe the way the designer has labeled that space. But my understanding was, I think as Councillor Robinson noted, it is usable area in downstairs. So essentially to get sufficient habitable area in 4 houses, but still leave enough room on the site for some usable outdoor space, they've gone into the ground to sort of capitalize, take advantage of that area. So it is a basement.
And with no access to the outside from the basement, though, all through the interior of the house, basement to cellar. Okay, good, thank you.
The cellar has no windows, but this one does.
Those windows or glass block? Anyway, doesn't matter. So, before us is first reading and a public hearing. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 11 is also a preliminary report on a proposed zoning bylaw text amendment. This is Bylaw 4354. This is to permit accessory amusement arcades within the CS1 service commercial zone. Recommendations to give first reading to see Coquitlam zoning amendment Bylaw 4354 and refer Bylaw 4354 to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Rasmussen, second by Councillor Robinson, who are both enthusiastic users of accessory amusement arcades. I'm a bit astounded that this doesn't incorporate boat shows and various other things that we put on the same lot. I don't like, anyway. First reading and Councillor Reamer.
I just want to thank staff very much for being so responsive, because this inquiry that we received from Crash Crawleys came in just a short time ago, so I just want to thank staff very much for getting this to us so quickly.
There you go. That was an arcade. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? It's going to public hearing.
Item 12 is the 2013 council meeting schedule. Recommendations that council approve the 2013 council meeting schedule.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Hodge. Councillor, I'm looking forward to August. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I do have a question about, with the last meeting on December the 9th, 2013, and then it would be probably 5 or 6 weeks before there's another meeting. And there's only 2 meetings in December. I just think it's a long time to go without doing any city business. So was there any rationale for not doing something on the 16th? I know it's the 3rd Monday, but the experience is that when we take a chunk of time, there's often what feels like a rush or a very packed agenda, the last one before the break, and then again when you get back. So I'm just inquiring about.
Mr. Gilbert.
No, I wouldn't say it was a rationale. I think the 2 meetings in December has been the norm for quite some time in the city of Coquitlam. What we've actually done in order to increase the work to be done in the second meeting was we've added a public hearing, which has not always been the case. This is one of the first years that we've done it is this year. And having a council meeting at the conclusion of that not only permits fourth reading of the budget bylaw, but allows those items that have come forward to that public hearing to receive necessary readings as well. So in fact, the last 2 years, this year and the proposed 2013, are an increase from previous years on the second Monday. The third Monday has not traditionally been a council meeting. Council's schedule is often filled up with other community-related events due to the holiday season and stuff like that.
Okay. I guess what struck me is that there's actually 5 Mondays that month. that December,
Which is an unusual
which is partly unusual. Okay, thank you.
And I assure any council members that wanted to find some council-related duties, there will be a stack of documents to be signed on my desk if you want to drop by. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We did a lot of that unanimously. All of it?
No.
One of it. Yeah.
Number 5. Item 13 is Metro Vancouver Board and Brief. We have our board representatives available to respond to questions, and the recommendation is that council receive the brief for information.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Your Worship, that's the last formal item on this agenda.
I want to make Coquitlam Minor football had a very successful weekend. The Vikings won the Junior Bantam BMFL League Championship game on Saturday. They're going on to Abbotsford, or to play Abbotsford in the Valley League on the 24th, which will advance them to the provincial title game. We've also had a number of other Adam Division Team 1 and so Coquitlam Minor football, great success. I know a couple of you were at the various games on this past weekend. Any other comments? Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. As is our custom, we'll allow any questions from the audience on tonight's agenda. Any questions on tonight's agenda? Any questions? Thank you all for coming.